Hello.
Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. You?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, good lockdown hair.
Thanks. I did my roots, bit of a home job the other day. See if it's spotting the COVID cut.
Yeah, I'm doing the same. I'm still waiting for my roots. Yeah, my roots a long time ago.
How have you been, Becky?
Good, thank you. You guys?
Good.
Yeah, very good, very good. It's quite nice being a key worker, but everybody clapping you on a Thursday is quite nice, really.
Yeah, I'm going out especially for it. I'm just walking down the road because I feel like I need somebody to clap at me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There we go.
Right, let's be grown-ups. Welcome everybody to the HDB webinar, 3rd of June. It's good to see you all virtually in this new world that we live in. My name is Richard Meredith. I'm going to be kind of chairing the beginning of this and then handing over to Becky, one of our speakers, who will introduce herself in a moment. But as is routine, I'm just going to run you through the housekeeping for these things. Becky, if you could go on to the next slide. You're all on mute, so don't worry. You can sit and shout at us and say what you want and say, what a bloody idiot. None of us can hear you. So please yeah, remember that. Then you are being recorded though. So if there's anything tonight that you want to revisit at a later date, then this goes up onto the HDB YouTube website. So just type in HDB YouTube into Google and you'll find this webinar at the top, I hope. Time-wise, we're going to be kind of having a few discussions and a few points to go through tonight. We're looking at about an hour probably. We do kind of invite you all to ask some questions as we go through. Please do chirp in when you need to, if we want a point to make or you want to ask any of us any questions. We do have points for those of you collecting points for Neuroso, Basis and Dairy Pro. In the chat function or the question function on the right hand side of your screen, if you enter your member number, your name, the date of birth and your postcode, then we can apply for those points for you. So that's your name, member number, date of birth and postcode. Okay, right, on to tonight. So we're going to do a couple of introductions of kind of who we are, and then we're going to hand over to Becky. Becky and I myself are both kind of bossy and control freaks, so I think it came to the kind of good, the correct decision to hand over the control of this evening to Becky. She's going to direct the conversation, and myself and Martin are going to sit here and chirp in when possible. So my name's Richard Meredith. I'm from Herefordshire. We're just going to give you a bit of background to ourselves and what we do. I was pretty average at school, kind of mucked my way through, and then I went and did a degree in business management. I paid off my final student loan about 2 weeks ago, and I sat there thinking, what on earth did I do that degree for? What on earth did I do that for? It was a bit of a regret. So I did my degree, then I went to work at a local machinery ring for a few years before joining HDB in 2012. Kind of run my way through a few jobs at HDB, and I'm currently in a secondment as the head of Arable for the organisation, which is great and poses loads of kind of, with everything going on with Brexit, COVID, the weather, it's been kind of loads of exciting challenges to get my teeth stuck into, and I've enjoyed that. I just put on here kind of my joys and my challenges. What do I enjoy about life and my work? My work, I love the people that I get to work with, the farmers, the colleagues, everybody. I kind of thrive. I drive home kind of when I'm allowed to drive home. I drive home and kind of think, wow, those people were amazing. They wanted to get something out of life. HDB is a kind of real fun place for me to work. I get to be quite creative. I get to do silly things like this with Martin and Becky, and kind of you get to kind of show off your creativity. And obviously, kind of, as you can probably tell, I like talking and interacting with people. But what stresses me out? What are my challenges? Work-life balances. I think most of us can say that as a bit of a problem. Through COVID, I've actually tried to use this as a bit of a way to get my work-life balance back to 9 to 5 and kind of what normal is. So that's a bit of a thing for me. And taking time out from technology, especially the last couple of months. The phones going off, the online meetings, Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, everything's going on. That's one of my struggles. And I put finally there my short attention span. I'll probably zone out in half an hour and hand it to you. It's a bit of a kind of thing I need to focus on. But that's me in a nutshell. And I think we're going to go over to Martin now.
Well, yes, hello everybody. Well, if there's anybody there, I imagine you're all sitting in your pants with a glass of tea or a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something. I'm Martin. I'm a lowly farmer. I'm a poor doer at school. If you read our school magazine, comes out every year, and all the high achievers put in there what they've done. And Gordon is a banker in Hong Kong, and Tasmin is running a nursing operation for paupers in Papua New Guinea. But Martin stayed at home. So Martin, I feel like a bit of a bad doer. I'm a farmer in Herefordshire, and that's really all you need to know. I'm nothing very exciting. I'm a bold fellow. If you look at my photograph, I've lost a lot of weight since then during COVID, as you can see. Yeah, Richard can shake your head, but I haven't got your haircut. So yeah, I'm just here because I'm just a normal guy, really. My stresses and strains are the same as everybody else's, and it's just how we deal with it. But I've come to listen to Becky as much as talk to her about what I can do to improve myself, possibly.
You're
Becky.
definitely not what I'd call a bad doer, Martin, to be fair.
My life weight gain, that's about it.
So I'm Becky Leach. I work for Kite Consulting as a senior consultant and split my time at Kite between one-to-one consultancy with farmers, generally along the lines of business, teams, people, that sort of thing, and then also a bit of project management, so some of our larger corporate clients. I'd actually did all right at uni. I'm feeling pretty smug compared to these guys by the sounds of things. So I went to Bishop Burton and did a degree in animal science. And then I've worked throughout the industry, so mainly livestock sectors, as probably my background lends itself to. So I worked sort of 5 years at Dovecote Park, who do all the beef for Waitrose. I worked at Mole Valley Farmers when they came up north on their feed and forage teams. I did my stint at AHDB Dairy, so it's nice to be back speaking to old colleagues. And then currently at Kite, and for anybody who's unfortunate enough to follow me on Twitter, I can only apologise, but I'm fairly active on social media. Personally, as you can see, there's me and my 2-year-old there. So personally, I am a farmer's wife, a farmer's daughter, dad's a first-generation farmer, and try to be a mother to a rather tractor-obsessed 2-year-old as well. So that's it's brought me a few little stresses during lockdown. I'm not going to lie, he's just gone back to nursery this week, and yeah, it's sort of is going to help my stress levels, I reckon. Really excited to be here today, and it'll be good to have a bit of a chat and share some ideas and thoughts on farming and you know, and how you guys are coping out there, and also how Martin and Rich are coping. It'd be good to know, I mean, Richard did suggest that you might want to shout at the screen and keep yourself on, you know, because you're muted, and so you can shout whatever you want. Feel free to shout in the chat box as well. So if you want to shout at us and tell us what you think in the chat box, that'd be good. It'd be good to know where you guys who are on the webinar today are from. I'm sure Rich will tell me if anything comes through. But for those of you who might not have already guessed, I am from Yorkshire. So we thought we'd start off, set the scene, make sure that you knew what you were dealing with.
They always say that, how do you know someone that's from Yorkshire? And it's because they normally tell you.
Dun, dun, dun. Somebody get the drum kit out.
Good night.
Yeah.
I suppose first question is why we're here, and from my perspective, Rich uttered the words farming today, and I got huge ideas above my station. I thought, you know what, I've got a face for radio, I can get on this. So I thought I was going to BBC Radio 4, and by the time then I could realise I could back out. I'd already committed, so that's why I'm here today. I suppose there is a wider question about why are we here today, and probably for a more insight and idea into the answer to that question, it's probably worth handing back over to you, Martin. Why are we here?
Why are we here then? Okay, I think farmers are little tykes at keeping stuff to themselves. I don't think they are very brilliant at expressing their feelings. and I think they bottle up a lot of stuff that they probably should be sharing a bit more. Recently, I lost my friend, and we had a conversation one day about a boat, and the boat thing is an odd thing, and so we sat and had a chat. This is Russell. This is the guy who wanted the boat. Three of us about 5-6 years ago, a guy who worked in finance, who sort of owned all the farm machinery in Herefordshire, Russell and myself, we used to go to watch the rugby and used to get on a bit, and then we got to the stage where we were quite close friends. We had an opinion that perhaps Russell was a bit of a fisherman. He liked catching a mackerel. Pete liked to get on a boat as well because he could drink some scrumpy cider. So perhaps we should buy a boat together. And it was all talked about, and we decided how we were going to get the diesel there and how we could do it cheaper, and if we spilled it in the back of the truck it wouldn't matter, and all those things. But we didn't actually buy one. And then Pete was taken ill and unfortunately died about 4 years ago, and recently Russell was taken ill, and we had a chat over lunch one day, and I said, okay, Russ, if we get through this, where are you going to get your boat? Because we didn't do the boat at the time. We all need a boat. The boat could be a caravan, it could be a walking holiday, it could be anything. But the three of us, there's only me left, and none of us eventually had the boat. So where's your boat is my question. You know, have you got a boat? What can you do to get yourself a boat? Would a boat improve your life? And that's what Becky's going to tell us.
Well, not specifically in relation to a boat, to be fair.
Yeah,
but
it's a boating evening, really.
yeah, we're doing skipper training. I think there's a question, and one, there's nothing to stop you getting a boat, is there? So there's nothing to stop you. Yes, it was a dream with those guys, but there's nothing stopping you now potentially. I suppose when we spoke originally about doing this, we had a conversation about what being stressed or what not coping can prevent you from doing, and I think that's a little bit what we're going to talk about tonight. So just for clarity, I'm not going to tell you to calm down tonight, or I'm going to try not to tell you to calm down tonight. It's not a successful strategy usually, and it's the same with stress, really. It's no good for me to come and say don't stress, or for Martin and Rich to say don't stress. There will be some things in your life that are deserving of you being stressed about them. I think what we're going to try and do tonight is put a little bit of perspective on what those things are and what you should be stressing about, and share some examples and some tools and techniques and the things that you can do to help you reduce your stress levels, and ultimately, make sure you have the time and the headspace, and if you want to, go buy the boat. So I think that's the sort of background to where we're going with this. So I just wanted to talk a little bit first of all about stress in general. Martin, how do you feel today? So we've had a little bit of rain, so
yeah,
all 3 mil I think you've had.
Yeah, all 3 mil. A guy, we woke up this morning all excitable because it was going to be the saviour of everything this year. Someone asked me this afternoon, how much rain have you had? And I went and unfortunately looked at the meter, and it was 3 mil. So yeah, whether 3 millimeters will save the world, I'm not quite sure. But no, today I am not too bad. There are lots of things going on in my world, but I don't feel too bad in myself. I'm very, very lucky in some respects. So I think personally that I don't handle stress too badly. I know that I talk to a lot of people who are, I think, under more stress than they will let on, and speak to several people who do let on, and I think letting on is quite a good thing to start with. So my day is bad, but I'm happy. I enjoy listening to other people's stress. That's one thing that I quite enjoy. I like listening to people, which is an odd thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you seen the two Ronnies? The two Ronnies used to do a thing with John Cleese, and I look down on him because he's smaller than me, and I look up to him because he's a city banker or whatever it is, and very often when you're feeling a bit down, it's nice to have somebody to ring that you think's in a worse position than you, which is a farmer's thing, I think, but equally it's nice to be able to listen, to put perspective in your own life.
I ring you when I need cheering up.
Yeah. I ring you when I need a bad haircut. Yeah.
I don't think we've heard of the end of that haircut. No, problem shared is a problem halved, isn't it, I suppose?
Indeed. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, absolutely. And,
so you said,
go
on.
Well, farmers are pretty bad at talking, or they have been, and farmers are really strange. You can have a best crop competition. Well, I've noticed on Twitter, because I do look a bit at Twitter, this year it seems already the book is open on the worst field of wheat. So it's going to be a competition to find the worst field of wheat. Well, it's okay if it doesn't really matter to you, but it might not be that it's quite so funny if it does matter to you. So farmers are funny with their competitions, aren't they? Who can be the most stressed? Who can be have the longest holiday? Who can have the biggest AD plant? Whatever it might be, they're funny with their competitions.
Game of top trumps, but in reverse, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Reverse top trumps. Yeah, perfect.
On a trumping note, you said you think you deal really quite well with stress. So what, I've put up here some examples of what stress might look like in terms of physiological response. So that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which probably people on the call have heard of. How do you know when you're stressed? What are your signals?
For me, my thing, I feel I'm most stressed if I feel out of control of a situation, or unable to deal with something in a manner that's comfortable. It might mean that I haven't planned for it, or it might mean that I haven't got the tools or the contacts in my book to help me deal with it. So that's when I feel stressed, is when I'm sort of feel out of control.
What behaviours do you see yourself displaying? Is there a bit where you sort of, on reflection, you look back and you think, like, I can be quite sharp sometimes. I think I've been really efficient, so I get really to the point and I get really direct, and I'm like, I need this, let's do that. And then on reflection, I usually have to look back and think, that was probably a bit bossy, or a bit direct.
I get a bit grumpy. My chaps, I hope they're not listening, but I do get a bit grumpy with them sometimes, and I haven't got patience. No, they won't be here. Yeah, and maybe I always take work home with me, so it's no good saying you can go home and switch off, but it's how, at the level of when you can switch off. I like a bit of meaningless TV sometimes, and if you asked me what I'd watched the night before, I probably wouldn't know. But that's probably when I'm a bit stressed, because I'm not really watching the telly, but it just happens to be there. So that's where I am with it. And I've said to people just recently, with a few bits and bobs I've got going on, that if I turn into a right A person, will you please let me know, because I don't want to turn into that person and think, I hope he doesn't ring me again. But so I try to keep a lid on my personal responses to people. Then that's what I try.
I don't think I got that option, to be fair. I don't think you've given me that invite. I've had to put up with you.
I know you have. I know. Well, you deserve it, though. You can take it. You're from Yorkshire, remember?
So by the sounds of things, me and Martin are a fairly sort of fight mode. Would that be the same for you, Rich? Or would you see some of these other behaviours coming through? So, do you think you sort of default in a particular scenario to certain behaviours?
I've got two things. When I'm stressed, I don't sleep. I sit awake at night worrying about things. That's a good sign to me that I'm kind of not addressing it correctly. And the other thing kind of leads on to yours. It's been out of control, and I know when things aren't right, because I prioritize the wrong things, and you start thinking about the aspects of your life that you can't change, worrying about them too much, when I should be focusing on things I can kind of hit head on and do something about.
Yeah, that will come on.
You could get stressed about everything, couldn't you? Whether the kettle's a bit slow, whether it's not raining, whether it's COVID, whether you can't get to Morrison's because you're 30 meters behind because there's 15 people in front of you. You could get stressed about every single thing, if you let it.
And Joe Franklin's written on the chat that kind of it's not just always one thing, it's just a culmination of various different things in your life can all come together one day and just not be aligned.
Yeah, it's probably worth pulling this up at that point then. Yeah, so there's sort of there's internal and external stress, isn't there? So there's external, which is the things around you and the pressures or the physical things that are happening and putting stress on you from the outside environment. And then there's that internal stress, which is your own barometer of and you worrying about the pressure that's been put on you. And coming back to your point about, you know, lots of different things, a little bit of stress. I think sometimes when we talk about stress, and especially in farming, we always are talking about negative stress. Well, actually, a little bit of stress, not too frequent and not too sustained, is good for performance. You know, it's stimulating. It allows you to be creative. It gives you energy. You know, you get a sense of achievement. I think that the balance is when it starts to sort of slip over into either being that persistent lower level stress or those really high periods of stress, you know, that are dragging on. I think that's, you know, and that could be anything, couldn't it? That could be personal, that could be business, that could be, you know, friendship circles. There's lots of different elements that contribute to that. And I suppose you know, when we were talking about the physiological response, it's been able to notice some of those signs as when it's tipping over into that distress rather than. I always think it's quite ironic that in the light of Brexit, it's called eustress, or eustress, like pretty stressful.
Well, there's stress and there's thrill, isn't there? And a parachute jump. People come down from a parachute jump and they say it's the best thing they've ever done, and I can't wait to do another. But some people, if they're clinging to the side of the aeroplane with the fingernails dragged across the floor, being pulled out from there, it's probably not their finest moment as they fell out through the plane, strapped to some fit young man or young woman, whatever it might be. So it depends on your want for stress, doesn't it? A lot of it. Some people, I quite enjoy a bit of stress. When we're busy and I can't quite cope, I quite enjoy it. But some people don't want that lifestyle, and if they don't, then that's fair enough.
Yeah, and we've all got a different propensity or a different capability, and that, you know, what is normal stress from a business or work perspective actually might, coming back to your guy on the chat, you know, actually it's when that's then on top of something else that it trips over into being, you know, actually this is too much, I can't cope. I'm probably a bit like you, Martin. I quite like the adrenaline. I quite like the bit of a rush that comes with it. But, and you know, similar, Rich. So I never framed not sleeping particularly well as stress. So I always used to talk about just being busy. You know, I'm really busy brain, so I just don't sleep. But you know, somebody once pointed out, and they're like, no, that's stress. And it's hard sometimes to see it in yourself, isn't it? So it's just picking up and making sure that we accept that we'll have a little bit of stress, and we are perfectly capable biologically of dealing with a little bit of that. It's about when that becomes distress. And I suppose what we're going to talk about today or tonight, this evening, is a bit about increasing your resilience and how you can improve your mental resilience in terms of stress. So I thought this picture sort of epitomizes to me what resilience is about. It's about that ability to bend without breaking. So, you know, almost take the stress and thrive on it still. What do you do, Martin, to manage stress? So, you know, you said you start to realize when you know you've got a few signals. How do you manage that?
Well, firstly, I don't think I could bend as far as that tree without my belt breaking. But
I've seen that photo. You definitely couldn't.
Yeah, you chose that photo, unfortunately. But yes, I rely on circles of people, really. You've got a circle of. I'm very lucky. I've got a very good circle of friends, and if I'm very stressed, you've got someone, each to their own, will deal with a problem for you. Well, I find that fantastic. I'm always on the phone. I live on the phone, really. And so going on from that, you've got a circle of friends for sort of personal resilience, I suppose. And then if from a professional resilience is going back to my phone. It's the people I've got in my contact book that can help with a situation, whether it be a broken pipe, a broken drain, a broken roof, a broken tractor, whatever it is, there's someone, isn't there? So for me, it's all about contacts. Everything is about contacts and people. And you know, Herefordshire obviously is a beautiful place, much nicer than ever Yorkshire could be. And everyone from everywhere thinks their place is the best. But why is it the best? It's probably not the view. It's probably not the scenery. It's probably not the sun in the morning, because the sun comes up most places. It's probably the people. It's probably the people that you've got around you. And so for me, people are everything. And they're quite reasonable people, really. Even they might get grumpy.
Even though they've got to deal with you.
Exactly. Even though they deal with me, they put up with me, which is great. So yeah, they haven't got fed up with me yet. Oh, and we just got a message in from 14 people. Oh, they actually have. But,
Yeah.
no, I'm very lucky. So everything to do with stress for me revolves around contacts and people.
What does it look like for you, Rich?
To de-stress for me, at the end of the day, it's obviously because I got a lot of phone calls coming in and I'm a bit of a slave to my phone. And about 12 months ago, someone said to me, try swimming. And I can't swim very well. I don't really enjoy it very much. But for that hour at the end of the day, every day, it makes me detox from the technology, from the phone. I have an hour free from technology. And while the pool's been closed for the last 2 months, I've been kind of keeping that up, kind of at 6:30, kind of put the phone in the drawer, walk away, and go and get away from it. And it really makes a difference to your mental state. Even if that phone, you're not on it, you're still thinking about, there's messages coming in, you're thinking about life and work and as well, and you can't get away from it much. So
I'm just hoping he doesn't do it in his Speedos when the pool's shut, but anyway.
Oh dear me. It would be good to hear on the chat if anybody else has got anything. I know that there's you know, there's quite a few of the charities that throughout COVID have promoted sport, haven't they, as a way of improving mental resilience. And I think there's, you know, when you look at resilience, there's physical resilience, there's emotional, spiritual, and there's mental. And I think there's lots of different ways, and it's about meeting those touch points. I'm with you. I like a swim because if I'm running, I'm definitely not very good at that, and I find that if my phone rings, that there is a bit of inclination to stop and answer the call, and yeah, it all ends up a bit deep breathing down the phone if you're not careful. I think the other thing that you've got to be really careful as or to consider when you are or a little tool or to think about in terms of stress is about giving some stuff some perspective. So when you're really in the depth of stress, every little molehill can feel like an absolute mountain. And again, that comes back to everything starts building up, doesn't it? So, you know, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's the, you know, going and, I don't know, on a dairy farm, you go and somebody's taken the last pair of milking gloves, or, you know, somebody's moved the sweeping brush in the grain store. You know, that's not end of the world stuff. It's absolutely no reason to lose your rag, but people do. It's because it starts adding to the pressure, and then you lose that perspective. And a really good way that I sort of that I think it's good to give it a bit of perspective is to ask yourself these few questions. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is this? You know, so when we're talking about you know, the brush, somebody having moved the brush, if you can take that deep breath and take a little bit of time and actually put it on the scale, it just rationalizes it a little bit in your head. And if that doesn't do it, you know, sort of following on from that is how important is this going to be to me in 6 months' time? So if I'm spending loads of time stressing about, you know, whether I've got whichever seed planted, or whether I've managed to get my combine rolling on the Monday or the Thursday because there was a bit of rain, or, you know, is this going to be important in 6 months' time, or are we talking bigger picture stuff? I think there's a bit about giving yourself perspective as well, in terms of is your response appropriate and effective? Because if you're overblowing it all the time, that can be stressful in itself. So and again, I think that probably comes, that's where your phone call comes in, Martin, is actually it's not about you know, the speaking to somebody helps the problem, but it actually helps you go through the process, doesn't it? It's because when you have to say it out loud to somebody, I flew off the handle today because somebody had moved the brush in the grain store, or, you know, actually that starts to put it in perspective. It starts to measure, is that appropriate and effective? Can you influence or improve the situation? Because sometimes, again, we get lost in this is a really stressful situation that I'm totally out of control, whereas actually, and you're focusing your energy all in the wrong place, and actually there is something you can do, or there's an acknowledgement that there isn't something that you can do. I think just in terms of your own continual development, is there anything that you can learn from the scenario, and will you do anything differently next time? So if you're giving it some perspective, you know, how can you use that learned behaviour to then do something different next time? And always try and find the positive. It's really hard sometimes, really hard, but there will be a positive. You know, if you'd have said to somebody, what's you know, there is no positive of a global pandemic. Well, actually, there probably is, isn't there? You know, we've had a lot more time at home. We've spent time with families. Yes, rather stressful situation, but you know, we've had more time at home. We've done less driving. We've learned to cook for some people. You know, that there is always a positive in a scenario, isn't there?
So if you get cross, say you're cross with a machine or a part or something in a workshop, and firstly you hit your thumb with a hammer or hit your finger on something. If you hit your finger a bit and there's an audience, you shout because they can hear you. If you hit your finger and it hurts too much, you don't shout. You actually think, no, I need to do something about that because that hurt too much to shout. And it's the same if you're doing something with a machine and you decide the spanner slips and you throw it. There's nothing worse than that walk of shame. What's the point of throwing it in the first place? Yeah, you've got to go and pick it back up yourself. So that walk of shame is, well, I got cross about that a minute ago. It's a moment of regret when you're bending down again to pick the spanner up from 10 yards away. So effective and appropriate and effective response is not throw the spanner away and perhaps not shout when you're first knocked. And that carries through into lots of decision making, doesn't it, really?
So somebody said on the chat, Amy said, it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile. Save the Botox.
See, that is the positive.
Yeah, there's the positive.
There you go. 10 out of 10, Amy.
Yeah.
So what causes you stress then, Martin? What's well, probably don't need to ask a farmer, but come on.
I'm sitting here with a black fingernail where I caught it the other day. That's where, hence I came back to the workshop scenario. But everything gets me stressed relatively, and the more you talk about worry, the worse you'll get. You can get yourself down a plug hole if you're not careful. So at the moment it's been dry, so the grass are half a crop, the wheat's going to be half a crop. Do you put fungicide on it? Do you not put fungicide on it? What about that poppy waving at you? You know, the weather is so bad. When's it ever going to rain again? And 3 months ago it was, when's it never going to stop raining again? So you could be all day long worrying about stuff. You know, is something going to break today? Is it going to be okay? Is everything going to go well? You know, what is it that you're going to stress about? You could go mad by 9 in the morning if you wanted to, but all those things stress me a bit. So they've all got a sort of a noise level. It just depends on whether you can turn the volume down on them, doesn't it? For me, so yeah, turning the volume down is, you know, like Twitter can wind you up, can't it? It winds me up. You get so cross with it, you decide not to look at it, and actually you don't get cross at all because you haven't missed anything. You know, it's simple things. It's just turning the volume down for me.
I think the really important thing about what you said there is about what can you do about it.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that comes back to this about what can you control. So we can spend a huge amount of time and energy and mental energy and invest a lot of that time and energy in being concerned about things that we can have absolutely no influence or no control on. So like top 3 farmer ones recently is weather, Brexit, COVID, across all sectors. So I spend a fair lot of time with dairy farmers, but across all sectors, none of those will pay any attention to the level of worry that we invest in them, will they? The weather doesn't care what we think. The weather don't care how much time we invest in it, nor can we influence or control levels of tariffs that are going to be applicable, or if there's other products coming in, from the EU, or same with COVID. We can't do anything about a global pandemic and all of the stuff that comes off the back of that. I suppose the bit where you can take control and how you can reduce your stress is really focus your energy on the things that you can influence in relation to that. So if we start talking about the weather, you mentioned a couple of things actually that are in your circle of influence. So you talked about, okay, do I put that second application of fungicide on, or if we think that weather's going to be a challenging weather conditions are going to be an increasing problem, can we look at varieties that are more drought resistant, or more I suppose we'd have been having the opposite conversation in winter, wouldn't we? But how because it was you just couldn't get anything in the ground. But how can we focus our energy on the things that we can control and can influence? So if it's Brexit, the tariff levels, no level of control, but actually the cost of your business or the productivity improvements, or focus that energy and being proactive in your mindset. And the more that I think earlier you said, Martin, about you feeling out of control is when you get stressed, and that's actually focusing on the things that you have no control of, not that makes you feel out of control, doesn't it? I suppose that if you're focusing on the things that you can influence, that makes you feel in control, and that can be quite motivated, and that's generally what people with a proactive mindset do, as opposed to those who have a reactive mindset and focus all that energy worrying about things that are essentially in that circle of concern on the outside. And what that does then is reduces your control, and in the long term you're then increasing the amount of negative feeling and that helplessness, that feeling of helplessness. I think the other thing that you've got to really avoid is this headless chicken mode. We can have so many conflicting priorities, we can have so much going on. Really, sometimes I think you've got to look at and decide what's important and actually tackle the right things. So what would be the things that sometimes Martin, that you're spending time and energy on, that really are taking time up, that running around like a headless chicken, and you shouldn't be dedicating any time there?
I'll start with social media, shall I? In case I get told off for not. But I spend too much time looking at that a bit. I can mess about. I enjoy my weekends. My weekend jobs are what give me pleasure, because the phone doesn't ring quite so much and I can potter. I could potter all week if I wanted to. I could find a pottering job without even trying very hard. But those pottering jobs and jobs that I'd like to do rather than jobs that need doing aren't going to help my stress level really. By Wednesday, you'd be a bit fed up because you've been pottering, fiddling while Rome burned, I think is the term, isn't it?
Yeah, so your social media and your pottering, is that not urgent and not important, isn't it? It's that, how can I procrastinate? How can I put off a job that I really need to do and delay it to the point that it's going to cause me maximum amount of stress because it is then urgent and important? So you've spent all this time scrolling social media. Tractor porn is a key, is a prime example, not urgent and not important. Why? And why farmers insist on looking at tackle that they're not in the market to buy, or cows that bulls that they're not in the market to buy, or that's a prime. Internet surfing is a prime example of that, not urgent and not important. And that's fine to do if you've got the time to do it, but what often happens is that displaces something else. I really like this as a model of helping my clarity of thought. So I have this laminated in A4 in front of me on the office wall, and whenever I'm doing I'll just check Facebook, I'll just check Twitter, I'll just go on the online banking, I wonder if there's any secondhand parts on eBay. Whenever I find myself like doing the social media rounds, I try and grab a pad of post-it notes and then put like those little mini ones, write down what each task that I've essentially got to do, and then I put them in here, and I put social media on one as well, or internet surfing, just because I think it helps my clarity of thought. So urgent and important, I suppose something that becomes urgent is where there's an impending deadline to meet, and we'll all end up in this at some point. So combine breaking down, or diesel running out, or PTO shaft breaking, or cow calving, or those are all urgent and important, and you've got to get on and do those. They can't always be put off. The challenge is if you're always working in that urgent and important, you're not particularly in control, and you are then in that sort of stress and burnout phase, because it's exciting for a while and then it just does become stressful. So go back to your curve of I forget that this camera's backwards as well. There you go, that's the right way around. Go back to that curve. Is if you're always urgent and important, if everything's up against the wire and the knife, being over optimistic with your time is another one that I suffer with, and I suspect as having the contracting business, you can sometimes suffer from that too, because that then ends up being everything's urgent and important because you've over promised, and when you do have a breakdown, there's nowhere to go. What we're trying to do, or what? Go on, Martin.
The other thing about urgent and important, it depends a lot on where your head is, and B, your life is, doesn't it? Urgent and important could be that you have a Sunday off. Urgent and important could be that you have your tea at 6 o'clock every weekday. Urgent and important might be that you go for a walk at 8 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. It might be urgent and important that you do that, and it depends on where your life is. Urgent and important doesn't always have to be a work thing. Urgent and important could well be family time or something of leisure. The fact that if you class it as not urgent and not important, you could end up turning into a bore, really, possibly. Just a thought.
Well, I'm going to argue a little bit, because I think that is, because I'm like that.
Yeah.
I think that is not urgent and important, because I think you should schedule that. So anything that you can schedule in advance is not urgent, is it? So it should be in your diary, or you should be planning to take, planning to take every other weekend off, or I'm planning to schedule time in to go swimming. Rich said earlier, you're going to plan in time to post lockdown meet up with your mates and go down the pub. So I think that sits in not urgent and important, because you can schedule it in. It becomes urgent and important when you are approaching burnout and you're like, I have to take some time away. So those emergency, I just need to get out of the house and speak to somebody, that's when it becomes urgent and important.
Yeah, work-life balance, I suppose, is where I'm going, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it works for everything.
Talk about work forever.
Yeah.
But farmers like that. We like that sort of thing.
Well, and it's so wrapped up in our being, isn't it? It's like when you farm, it's wrapped up in everything that you do. And generally all your mates are farmers. So there's, a lot of your friendship circle are farmers as well, aren't they? Because they're the only people who can tolerate you enough to hang out with you, aren't they?
They're the only ones that'll listen. Yeah, that's right.
If you the more time you spend in that not urgent and important, though, the bigger long-term perspective you can get. So things that are not urgent and important obey things like harvest, because you can plan it in. It should be things like doing the routine maintenance on the combine before harvest starts. It should be prepping the grain store. So it's all things that should be planned in advance. And when you were operating in that place, you get a lot better long-term perspective, rather than, hell, where's the next fire that I need to put out? The urgent and not important is I find is generally imposed upon you by somebody else. So it's the rep that drives up the farm drive, they become urgent because they're stood there in front of you, and they're not generally important to your business or to you meeting your objectives. It's the phone call. So we had a conversation earlier, didn't we, about going away. Like, we tend to take holidays out of the country because there's no, people don't ring you then. As soon as they hear an international dial tone, they ring off, don't they? Whereas if you say to somebody, oh, I'm on holiday next week, but you're still available, and they start ringing you, they expect you to answer, and then you pick up, and then 3/4 of an hour later, and they go, oh, sorry, I didn't realise you were on holiday. Can you do da 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 da? And they carry on talking, don't they? Whereas if you're out of the country, it sort of puts that to bed a little bit.
Yeah.
What proportion of your time do you think you're spending in each of those areas at the moment? Or what proportion of time do you think you're spending in urgent and important?
I think it depends on mine's a bit seasonal. So urgent and important, probably not quite so bad at the moment, but it'll probably get worse as the autumn progresses. Not urgent, important, that's always there really, and I'm not a very good person with that. I've missed a lot of social engagements through just carrying on working. So I'd say I'm not very good on the not urgent, important ones. Urgent, not important. Yeah, I do a lot of that. Urgent, not important. I end up in there quite often, and not urgent, important. I end up quite a lot of an evening as well. Back to my social media messing about, but yeah, and tractor porn. You know, there's a lot of websites on the internet that are quite enjoyable. I mean, I can't lie. You know, there's a lot of
we're still talking about tractors.
Yeah, there's a lot of machinery there to be looked at. That's all I can say.
As long as you look and don't touch.
Yeah, exactly.
So the aim is we're spending our time in that sort of not urgent and important, and definitely not spending it down here unless you've got everything else done and I'll, you know, cleared your to-do list. I always think as well that there's a bit about having the goal. So I would think if you've got a clear vision of what the goal is, then it becomes easier to do that prioritization thing, because it becomes a simple question of, does this move me closer to the goal, whatever the goal is? And that goal might be finishing and having tea with the family tonight, or it might be growing the business, or it might be, you know, finishing harvest. If you know what the end goal is, how you get there becomes a damn sight easier. And I think that it helps with your feeling of control. What we were talking earlier, Martin, about you know, today's goal and how that sort of impacted what you'd done today and how you'd operated.
Yeah. Today I knew I was coming to do this. So there's my goal today. I've got to be out there on time, be present, as they say. I had a PTO shaft go on a muck spreader this afternoon, and as I was trying not to throw the spanners across the workshop covered in oil, trying to put this bearing back in a UJ, I turned to the guy who was helping do it, and I said, I don't think I've got time for this. But in that moment, I thought, well, I've got to have time for that. I need to get this done and be there. So yeah, I got it done. So my goal wasn't to spend all afternoon in the workshop. I ended up in there, but I also ended up here in and which is where I should have been, and what I should have been doing this afternoon was irrelevant really. And you know, he's working now, and that's happy enough. But yeah, my goal shifted a little bit this afternoon. All of a sudden I had 2 goals to fill. We managed it.
Yeah, and you flicked into that urgent and important, and that's fine, isn't it? That will happen. I suppose really useful from a bigger perspective, so a sort of more global perspective about the business. And when you may be thinking about stressing about some of the smaller things in the business, which you don't maybe appreciate as smaller things at the time, if one way of sort of scheduling or clearing your mind is about, okay, what's that goal? And if you are going to set a goal, probably need to think about that being clear about what that goal is. Make sure it has some sort of challenge in there so that you are feeling motivated. So come back to that stress curve again, you know, and make sure you're hitting all the points of this, because otherwise, if you've just set an innate goal, it's very hard to then work towards that. But again, more control. If you've got that picture of what it looks like, the route to get there becomes clearer. More control, less stress. So you talked a lot, Martin, about
I always talk a lot.
Well, yeah, you and me both. But you specifically talked a lot about using other people as a way of de-stressing or giving yourself some perspective.
Yeah.
The challenge with other people is you have no control over their stress levels or how positive or not so positive they might be. For some people, this glass will always be half empty. How do you, when you're sort of ringing people, how do you manage if you get on the phone, if you're feeling pretty negative yourself, and if that person that you've rung then is a bit negative as well?
I try, if I'm in an awkward conversation, hope nobody's listening. If I'm in an awkward conversation, I try and take myself up out of it, and look down on it as if I was a third party sometimes, just to put some perspective on it. And if I can feel a conversation being, you don't need two bad people in a conversation, one's plenty. So I'm happy to listen to someone's issues, even if I rang them with one. And sometimes that's quite cathartic. There's a big word. Yeah, I quite enjoy. I enjoy listening to people, really. I enjoy. Yeah, I enjoy listening to people. I enjoy the fact that people will tell me stuff, which I feel it's quite a privilege. So
yeah, I think sometimes you can, if you're in that way out, you can end up joining in, and you almost both, and in the same way that you can lift each other up, you can lift it, you can spiral together down and wallow in both of your self-pity. And I suppose that, resisting the urge to join in. So if somebody does ring you, resist the urge to join in, and come back to your point about, just sitting and listening. That there is no, when people ring you with a problem, they're not often looking for the solution, they're just looking to share. And I think sometimes it's about being compassionate, and I suppose we're sharing with a group of people listening in who, by the very nature that they've rung to listen in, I would hope are generally compassionate people. But sometimes we don't know what other folk have got going on, do we? And
no. We've had a question from Mark about gossiping. Mark knows I absolutely hate gossip. It absolutely is my pet hate, and I refuse to gossip. I hear lots and lots of things, that gossiping is one thing I don't like, and so that gossiping spiral, I think, is a way that negative people will enjoy themselves. Let's put it like that. And I think if you can ban gossip from your life, I think you'll probably find yourself in a better place than maybe those that do.
Always talk about people in the way that you would like to be talked about.
Exactly. I would never talk about someone as if they weren't there. I think, I wouldn't say something to anybody that I wouldn't say if the person that you were talking about was there. And I think that's, I don't like gossip. That's my pet hate.
It achieves no end, does it? And that banning gossip is a great principle, but ultimately some people do like gossip, don't they? Whatever they think. But there is a way that you can manage that, is because if you don't give it the airspace, or I'm the same. I'm not particularly well, I'm fairly direct, as probably most folk have realised, so I'm much better having a conversation face to face, and if I want to know something, I'm fairly confident going to ask it. But, you know, I have been known to turn around, I've got no interest in that, you know, I'll speak to the person, find out what the story is, if they want me to know, they'll tell me, and if they don't, I won't, sort of thing. I think
somebody's mentioned on the chat is kind of there's people in life that are sometimes happy being unhappy, and that's kind of like a drain in your life. Are you a radiator or a drain? It's gonna you got to manage who you're around, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's when, you know, you can mentally prepare yourself, and probably the points on this slide is, you know, I really actually quite like those people sometimes, because I almost make it a challenge to myself to make them say something positive. You know, so that's probably where the be the light comes from. Is it's really hard for somebody to be negative persistently if you are ridiculously positive.
If people are stressed and grumpy, though, you wouldn't want to be the person someone rang and that they had to take a deep breath before they phoned you. And, you know, if someone's got to take a deep breath before they ring you up, you're probably not in a very good place, are you? So, you know, try and be a little bit more compassionate with your language and manner. I think is a good way of getting out of stress. Being positive is quite a nice thing, you know. Anything is.
And there is a bit of that you know, that was maybe a bit flippant. There's knowing when that works. There are people who are naturally negative and always negative, and, you know, can find the problem in every single solution that you present in there, and that's, you know, where that positive tactic works. The be compassionate is, you know, sometimes we don't know what other folk are dealing with, and sometimes we need to give people a break, and it's dead easy to judge or to not be probably as compassionate as we could do. I suppose from your own perspective, when you're thinking about your own stress, is if you are with negative people, and for some people that might be the family that they farm with, and when I say know when to leave, is, you know when you need to walk away from a conversation, know when it's becoming negative, acknowledge when that happens, and give yourself permission to say, you know, I'm not in a position to deal with this right now, or I just need to take 5, or find a job, make a job up that you just need to go do, just to take yourself out of that situation and get a little bit of perspective.
Yeah, and the be compassionate thing, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, haven't you? So it's often easier to listen than to make yourself look a fool and say something silly. So just have a listen to start with and engage somebody's mood.
Yeah.
I
think there's a, you know, in farming, I think you alluded to it earlier about, you know, we don't sort of like to talk sometimes. We have a moaning competition on a superficial level sometimes, and we don't always acknowledge maybe when that is going beyond just and becoming proper stress, or not proper stress, but you know, becoming genuinely a problem where we're feeling overwhelmed and where we can't deal with it. I think, you know, as in agriculture we try to deal with stress and challenges, is it's all right to be honest with yourself, and make sure, going back to those earlier slides, that you know what stress looks like with you, and be honest when you start seeing those signs, and be proactive in deciding how you're going to deal with it. And also being honest with others as well. You know, sometimes you do need to share the load, sometimes you do need to ask for help, and I don't think we should be afraid to do that. And I think we are getting better as a general population and as an industry. I think we are getting better at acknowledging it. I think there's more help out there. Do you have one person, Martin, that would be sort of your go-to when you need to share how you're really feeling?
Oh, cut me when I'm down, why don't you? I did have, but unfortunately he died in March, and so he was my go-to person. And so now I find I've got several different people that do several different jobs. Instead of having an adjustable wrench, I've got a toolbox that, yeah, one spanner fits one job, sort of thing. So yeah, it's slightly different to what it used to be. But but I'm getting used to it, and it's fine. It's absolutely great. But yeah, I used to have a sort of one size fits all spanner, but now times are different. So, but
I'm sure I'd be chuckling thinking of you calling him adjustable spanner.
An adjustable wrench, but there we go. Yeah. But,
yeah, and I suppose the bit that you've identified is actually now you need to fill that gap in other ways.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, won't replace Russ, but you know, in different ways at different times.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got a toolbox now instead of a spanner.
I suppose we're probably yeah, and I think, you know, if we just want to, I'm conscious of time, and obviously if there's anybody who's put any comments or if we want to continue the conversation, we of course can. I think we probably need to start to pull things together a little bit to avoid getting into that spiral. I think, you know, I would always reframe this as, oh God, I thought we had to be done for 8. They're all socially distanced. They're all going to, can you imagine when it comes back, it's all going to be socially distanced. You won't remember anyway.
No. No. Someone's asked, how are you out of 10? I don't know if that means what, from a stress level or from a looks wise. I think from a looks wise, I'm a 10. But from a stress wise, if 1's nil and 10 is bad, probably underlying, I'm an 8.5, 9. But I think I'm sort of managing it down to a 3 or a 4, maybe. If that's what you're asking, Mark, I don't know. You might not have been asking me, but who knows?
Do we get to vote on whether it's from a looks perspective and what score you are?
Yeah, only it's a very small poll, and my parents can be involved.
Something Mark's mentioned on here, Mark Campbell, is kind of saying, kind of scoring your mood out of 10. And I was saying to these guys before that my postman every morning and we do this, we score kind of what kind of day you having, or say kind of 4 out of 10. Putting it at that level, measuring it, then gives you a bit of a kind of a baseline to work away from and make it a 6.
Yeah, it is a good point actually. If you mark yourself in the morning or the evening out of 10, isn't it? And if you can improve on your score, I suppose you're doing a good thing.
Yeah, I think you've just got to be careful if you're talking about underlying 8.5. That, you know, that sort of made me sit up a little bit in terms of you know, how.
I'm just being honest. Yeah.
Because that can be a bit of a challenge in terms of that, you know, be honest with yourself in terms of, is that sustainable long term? You know, would we like to think that you were at score 8.5 long term? Hopefully what you're going to go away and do is do some of the stuff that we've talked about, and that actually might bring it down.
It's almost turning into like a Zoom meeting with my local GP. I've actually got a growing toenail as well. No, I just hope nobody's listening. But no, I'd say I'm being honest at 8.5 and managing it down myself. But over time, I've got sort of things happening that will possibly make myself into a 3 and a 4, possibly longer term.
What would you do if you spoke to somebody who you felt was feeling real and low on that scale? What would your first way of kind of, because you're very good at getting people to open up and talk,
if they were low then they were high stress, or low in that they were not stressed out?
It's all very well you say to people when you're feeling down, you can talk to somebody, but it's not, you don't necessarily want to. You're very good at getting these things out of people. What do you do when you feel somebody's kind of lower?
Generally, I'll give them a call and listen. That's the first thing I'll do, is give them a call and have a listen. And it's not generally what they say. It's I hope nobody will speak to me again, but it's not generally what they say, it's what they don't say for me. But we sound like a terrible therapy session at the moment, because I'm a farmer, not a therapist, but that's what I would do if somebody's miserable. I'll give them a call and see what they're not saying.
Becky, you touched on it earlier, and somebody's mentioned it here on the chat, is kind of what do you do about family pressures? Because often there's no holds barred with family, and there's no conversation that you can't have, and you really know each other, how to press each other's buttons and really kind of go for the Achilles heel. What do you reckon to that? How do you kind of manage those situations when you've got a parent or a sibling knowing how to really kind of wind you up?
Well, probably the fact that they know how to wind you up means that you should be able to see what they're doing to a certain extent. Very difficult, and I speak as, you know, somebody who is married to a farmer and somebody who I consider myself a farmer as well as being the daughter of one. And you know, I think you have to create a little bit of a line in terms of, you know, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And I do think we give a lot of free passes in agriculture to each other in terms of, yeah, but it's okay because we were stressed because we were moving cattle, or it's all right because we were stressed because we were up against it with the pressure with harvest and what have you. You know, probably some of the things that we do are not okay, and certainly wouldn't be okay if you were in a work environment and didn't, you know, and you, if you wouldn't, I always think with families, if you wouldn't talk to, and this is not always a great example because it does stray a little bit further, but you know, would you accept the rep coming on farm and talking to you in the way that you talk to maybe dad or brother or sister or wife? Or I think that's a pretty good metric to start with, because you sort of desensitize with family, don't you? And I think I come back to your point about weekends, Martin, you know, whether it's a weekend or whether it's a midweek, or, you know, getting off to the local ag show, not this year obviously, but you know, giving yourself permission from time away from the farm. And it can be really hard, because when you feel up against it, when you're working in that urgent and important section, it's then hard to say, well, I'm going to take time out. But actually, if that gives you a bit more perspective and time to think and a bit of a reboot, you know, sometimes you just need to reboot the system, don't you? And I think that's when time away from farm can be really valuable.
Yeah. And sometimes families are funny things. I'm going to offer a real tangent now, and I'm sorry. If you want to go home and watch Emmerdale, go and watch Emmerdale. But when I was very much younger, I wanted to go to Smithfield, which was the thing to do when you were a young kid. I must have been 18 or 19, and December, first week in December, Smithfield show, I wanted to go with my neighbour, and I was afraid to ask my dad to go to Smithfield until the last minute, because I thought, well, if I ask him in the last minute, it'll be he can't say no and I'll go anyway. But asked him the night before, can I go to Smithfield tomorrow? And he said, yeah, you can go, but if you put a CB radio in the tractor before you go. And that sort of family peer pressure, I did. I got up at 4 in the morning to put this CB radio in so that I could get on a train at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, families can be beggars for that, can't they? Putting pressure on people, making you feel that you need to earn something to be able to have a time off, to earn something to be happy. And that I think, yeah, well, I still haven't forgotten, and it was 30 years ago. So that sort of thing, you've got to marginalize it or discuss it. I think discuss it. If I was doing that again, I probably should have told him to clear off. I'm not putting a thing in there at 4 in the morning. I'd do it the following day. But families are difficult, and I can, yeah, the questioner, I can only sympathize with family issues.
I think sometimes as well, that goes back to that goal setting, and a bigger picture goal setting is, you know, there's a lot of obligation in farming, isn't there? Especially, you know, where tenancies have been passed down, or where there's, you know, the farm's been in the family for a lot of years. That overall goal, you know, come back to your point about the boat. What are we doing it for? You know, nobody deserves to be unhappy, and if working with family or working in agriculture is stressing you out all the time, and you're spending all your time in the distress side of the curve, then, you know, that goal setting about where do I want to be in the long term, what do I want this to look like for me personally, and can the business deliver my long-term goals and objectives, that can be a really powerful process to go through.
Yeah, definitely. And if we are going back to the boat and putting some messages on, if you flick on, yeah, so we bored you for an hour and 10 minutes. I can only apologize for that. Yeah, so what are you going to do if you're miserable? How long have you been miserable? How long have you been stressed? How long are you willing to be stressed for before you do something about it? If you're happy being stressed and you live on, thrive on it, fair enough. But if you're not, then how long will you do that for? And what are you doing it for? Messages: get yourself a boat. It doesn't have to be a boat. It can be a goldfish. Get yourself a boat, something that gives you pleasure, something that you've always wanted to do. It doesn't have to be anything much. Go swimming. Look at Richard and his Speedos. The second thing, there's only one trip, not Uncle Bryn's boat trip. There's only one trip through this world, I believe anyway. So make the most of it. Why be stressed all your life? What are you doing? Number 3, sort out your big issues. Sort the big issues, and the little ones will be not so bad. The big issues, well, unless you sort them, they're always going to be there, aren't they? Aim long with your goals. Aiming short, if all you're worried about is the next hour, you're going to live in a world of stress, and you're not going to know where you are for the next week. The biggest thing for me is looking after a circle of friends. Looking after your circle of friends, they can help in umpteen different ways. It can be a cup of coffee, it can be a biscuit, it can be a kind word. Look after your circle of friends. And so for me, those would be my take-home messages, or give to take-home messages to anybody listening tonight if they sat in your pants at home feeling stressed. Yeah. So,
I'm worried that's like the 3rd time you've mentioned people at home in their pants.
I know. Well, I always think of people sitting in their pants
all the time
on the internet. It's just my thing. Sorry. Yeah, I can't judge everybody by my standards, obviously, because if you're thinking it's wrong.
Becky, before we kind of conclude, there's a comment that's come in among a few, but is how do you deal with a farm worker or a colleague who is past retiring age but is always grumpy and drags you down when you're quite a young new entrant but a younger generation thing? I think that's something we've all related to at some point in our careers. What do you two think about
that? The age one, yeah, the age is probably almost irrelevant to a certain extent. I'd be careful not to fall in that trap too much. A real honest conversation about, do they want to be here? And I think that's the same as the family situation, isn't it? Do you want to be here? Do they want to be here? Because sometimes they might think that they don't have any other option. Sometimes, when you start having a conversation with people, I've heard all sorts of things on farm about, you go speak to the herdsman who's desperate to retire, but thinks he's leaving the young lad in the lurch who can't cope on his own. We're terrible in agriculture. Well, everybody is for assuming and for not always talking as openly as we possibly should do. So, I think talking first.
There used to be an award at our local show. I won't mention it, and it was like they used to give out long service medals. I don't think it's done quite so often now because people chop and change when the transfer window opens, like football. But I always used to think it was like someone getting a gold watch when they retired, because it was almost like a golden handshake to bugger off. With a young person struggling with an old worker, it's probably about tradition and I know this more than you will ever know. I've been here for this length of time. Who do you think you are, you gilet wearing upstart? And I have no idea who you are, to be honest. You probably do wear a gilet, because I do. But there's all that sort of power struggle, isn't there, going on between a young person and an old person. And some of that old person, let's put it positively from the young person's perspective, the old guy is probably feeling under threat. He's probably feeling, he knows it's his way out. It's like an old dog getting up with a stiff leg, isn't it? He probably knows he's in his autumn years. The old guy is probably resentful of the fact that there's someone young living his life through a gilet wearing eyes. there's all sorts of things going on in that guy's head, the 65, 7, 8, 9, 70-year-old, that probably need addressing. And so you are being sort of, yeah, someone's put on here, give them a boat brochure, but yeah, offer them a boat, offer them a something, try and do something to create an interest elsewhere that takes their mind off you being a younger. I don't know, that's what I would do.
I think there's a bit as well about not letting that person derail you moving towards your goal. So yes, it can be draining, but they can only take whatever energy that you're willing to give them. You know, so if you've got clear sight of your goal, don't let nobody else can pull you off course. If you know where you're going, you know, yes, it might be, you know, it adds an added complexity, but it doesn't change the overall destination.
Yeah, well, just manage your mood by imagining what's going on in his head and thinking, well, actually, his problems aren't my problems, and if he wants to share them, fair enough. If he doesn't, then yeah, that's that. I'm afraid. Sorry, this sounds like one of those late night chat phone-ins, doesn't it? Now it's sort of
late night love.
Late night love. Yeah, I was sitting too close to that. Really.
Yeah, just as a final, you know, if you don't feel comfortable talking to friends, because that, you know, you clearly get that clearly is where you process a lot of your stress, Martin, but not everybody would be the same, you know, and sometimes it can be easier to think you're talking to somebody who's not quite so close or doesn't know you, or, you know, not that I think friends would judge you. I think it's much worse in your head than it is reality, but there are lots of people out there, and especially people with an understanding, you know, and I know you've done quite a lot of these meetings, or you've built quite a strong support network through the Cereals Monitor Farm programme, but there are other organisations that are geared up to deal with or to help as well.
Definitely.
100%.
Yeah, definitely. And it, you know, that nobody's judging you, not from these places, definitely not.
No, safe place.
Yeah, but think positively. Think positively. You're in charge of your own life. You're in charge of your own destiny. So everybody's got options. There's always an option, regardless of whether the weather's bad. There's always options. And
you've had 3 mil. You can't moan now, Martin.
Exactly. I've had 3 mil of rain. I mean, look at the options.
Winning.
Well, yeah, talk about winning.
Positively lush down your neck of the woods now.
I know. It's like jungle down here now. Jungle. But no. Yeah, seriously, it's just look after each other. That's the main thing. Stress can be managed, can't it?
Yeah.
All right.
I think we're about there, aren't we?
Yeah, we've gone
Let
well over.
these good people.
We're well over.
We've gone well over. So all that leaves me to do is thank Becky and Martin for such an open and kind of candid discussion tonight. It's not the easiest of topics to kind of address head on, because every single person listening to this and on the planet is very different, and they deal with these things differently, and they manage their stress differently. So thank you guys for kind of opening up and kind of sharing your experiences, and hopefully others can learn from that. It's usually at this stage we'd point out kind of the next webinar and stuff going on, but in the light of COVID, AHDB has got a lot of webinars going on. So on our website, you'll find a kind of a plethora of things in your area or nationally. So please don't shy away from that, and get the most you can from all these things going on. So all that leaves me to do is wish you all good night. And my main take home point that I've written from tonight is it's good to talk, but it's also good to listen as well. So make sure you do. Thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.